Let me shift gears with you quickly and talk about guns right now. This could be a critically important week as far as background checks, expanding background checks, legislation in the Senate. It may get passed, it may not get passed. The president speaking in Connecticut, getting ready right now to speak out on this specific issue. What are you hearing right now, Jim? Because you follow this pretty closely.
Well, I just had a chance on Friday to catch up with Mary Landrieu. She is one of the remaining undecided Democrats in the Senate on this issue of background checks. And even though she voted to close the gun show loophole back in 1999, she told me on Friday she's still undecided on this issue of background checks. And the reason is because of re-election pressure. She, along with a handful of other Democrats, are essentially endangered in many of these red states. And that is part of the problem for the president right now. Not only is he dealing with entrenched Republicans who are threatening to filibuster this legislation, he's dealing with Democrats who may not join in with Harry Reid to break a potential filibuster. So lots of problems for the president. But I have to wonder, Wolf, and we're going to see the president carry out what will be a very dramatic political moment in that he is going to be meeting with family members.
He's just wrapped up meeting with the family members. Yeah. In fact, he's speaking right now. I want to listen in.
All right.
Them inherited their talents by singing before she could talk. So every family in this state was shaken by the tragedy of that morning. Every family in this country was shaken. We hugged our kids more tightly. We asked, what could we do as a society to help prevent a tragedy like that from happening again? And as a society, we decided that we have to change. We must. We must change. I noticed that Nicole and others refer to that day as 12/14. For these families, it was a day that changed everything. And I know many of you in Newtown wondered if the rest of us would live up to the promise we made in those dark days. If we'd change too, or if once the television trucks left, once the candles flickered out, once the teddy bears were gathered up together, that the country would somehow move on to other things. Over the weekend, I heard Francine Wheeler, who lost her son Ben that day, say that the 4 months since the tragedy might feel like a brief moment for some, but for her it feels like it's been years since she saw Ben. And she's determined not to let what happened that day just fade away. We're not going anywhere, she said. We are here. We are going to be here. And I know that she speaks for everybody in Newtown, everybody who is impacted. And Newtown, we want you to know that we're here with you. We will not walk away from the promises we've made. We are as determined as ever to do what must be done. In fact, I'm here to ask you to help me show that we can get it done. We're not forgetting. We can't forget. Your families still grieve in ways most of us can't comprehend. But so many of you have used that grief to make a difference. Not just to honor your own children, but to protect the lives of all of our children. So many of you have mobilized and organized and petitioned your elected officials with love and logic, as Nicole put it, as citizens determined to right something gone wrong. And last week here in Connecticut, your elected leaders responded. The Connecticut legislature, led by many of the legislators here today, passed new measures to protect more of our children and our communities from gun violence. And Governor Malloy signed that legislation into law. So I want to be clear. You, the families of Newtown, people across Connecticut, you helped to make that happen. Your voices, your determination made that happen. Obviously, the elected leaders did an extraordinary job moving it forward, but it couldn't have happened if they weren't hearing from people in their respective districts, people all across the state. That's the power of your voice. And by the way, Connecticut's not alone. In the past few months, New York, Colorado, Maryland have all passed new common sense gun safety reforms as well. These are all states that share an awful familiarity with gun violence, whether it's the horror of mass killings or street crime that's too common in too many neighborhoods. All of these states also share a strong tradition of hunting and sports shooting and gun ownership. It's been a part of the fabric of people's lives for generations. And every single one of those states, including here in Connecticut, decided that yes, we can protect more of our citizens from gun violence while still protecting our Second Amendment rights. Those two things don't contradict each other. We can pass common sense laws that protect our kids and protect our rights. So Connecticut's shown the way. And now is the time for Congress to do the same. Now's the time for Congress to do the same. This week is the time for Congress to do the same. Now, back in January, just a few months after the tragedy in Newtown, I announced a series of executive actions to reduce gun violence and keep our kids safe. And I put forward common sense proposals, much like those that passed here in Connecticut, for Congress to consider. And you'll remember in my State of the Union address, I urged Congress to give those proposals a vote. And that moment is now. As soon as this week, Congress will begin debating these common sense proposals to reduce gun violence. Your senators, Dick Blumenthal and Chris Murphy, they're here. Your representatives, John Larson, Rosa DeLauro, Elizabeth Esty, Jim Himes, Joe Courtney, they're all pushing to pass this legislation. But much of Congress is going to only act if they hear from you, the American people. So here's what we have to do. I appreciate that. Here's what we've got to do. We have to tell Congress it's time to require a background check for anyone who wants to buy a gun so that people who are dangerous to themselves and others cannot get their hands on a gun. Let's make that happen. We have to tell Congress it's time to crack down on gun trafficking so that folks will think twice before buying a gun as part of a scheme to arm someone who won't pass a background check. Let's get that done. We have to tell Congress it's time to restore the ban on military-style assault weapons and a 10-round limit for magazines to make it harder for a gunman to fire 154 bullets into his victims in less than 5 minutes. Let's put that to a vote. We have to tell Congress it's time to strengthen school safety and help people struggling with mental health problems get the treatment they need before it's too late. Let's do that for our kids and for our communities. Now, I know that some of these proposals inspire more debate than others, but each of them has the support of the majority of the American people. All of them are common sense. All of them deserve a vote. All of them deserve a vote. Consider background checks. Over the past 20 years, background checks have kept more than 2 million dangerous people from getting their hands on a gun. Now, a group of police officers in Colorado told me last week that thanks to background checks, they've been able to stop convicted murderers, folks under restraining orders for committing violent domestic abuse, from buying a gun. In some cases, they've actually arrested the person as they were coming to purchase the gun. So we know that background checks can work, but the problem is loopholes in the current law let so many people avoid background checks altogether. That's not safe. It doesn't make sense. If you're a law-abiding citizen and you go through a background check to buy a gun, wouldn't you expect other people to play by the same rules? If you're a law-abiding gun seller, wouldn't you want to know you're not selling your gun to someone who's likely to commit a crime? Shouldn't we make it harder, not easier, for somebody who's convicted of domestic abuse to get his hands on a gun? It turns out 90% of Americans think so. 90% of Americans support universal background checks. Think about that. How often do 90% of Americans agree on anything? And yet 90% agree on this. Republicans, Democrats, folks who own guns, folks who don't own guns, 80% of Republicans, more than 80% of gun owners, more than 70% of NRA households. It is common sense.
All right, so there he is, the President of the United States, making a pitch for deeper background checks for all gun sales in the United States. Extensive coverage coming up later tonight, right here on CNN.